Okay, we're on time. We'll give Paul a few minutes, see if I think he's gonna be coming on.
Isn't he live? Did he say?
He's in Boston.
I think so, yes.
Quorum four?
Excuse me.
Quorum, is it four,
Yeah, with 7 members.
7 members?
Yeah,
Four, okay.
so we
We
got
got four.
5 already.
Correct. Let's start the meeting. So,
Kimberly.
No meeting scheduled. What did I say? Can't see it. Listen.
You wanna admit,
Is he there?
there you go.
See who it is before we admit it.
Well, it was Andrew Dallas, but. I think
Yeah,
it's right.
He signs all right then. Yeah, she's connecting.
Hey. Hey.
Can you hear us, Kimberly,
Kimberly?
Andrew?
Am-
Somebody?
Hello?
Hello? Kimberly, can you hear us?
They're on mute. But that's probably.
On their end?
side- On their end.
Yeah.
I would think. It could be Andrew, it's a public meeting, right?
Yeah. Usually she goes, signs on with his.
I would imagine it's Kimberly, but never can tell.
Yeah.
Hey, folks, I'm here and can hear you.
Okay,
Oh,
great.
there you are.
Thank you.
Hello.
How do we know it's her?
I'm trying to get my video to go next.
I got her voice there. I'm gonna give it a few more minutes for Paul and I'll give her a call, see if,
That might be him.
No, there he
Yeah,
is.
got it.
There it is.
good.
Good man. E.
Good. Paul, Pat here. We see you, just signed in.
Yep, oh, there they are.
There's everything.
Good.
We've got a good group here. Well, let's begin. A call to order. We have Lenny, Tanya, Mike, Chris, Pat, Paul, and Kimberly. So we've got all hands on deck here today. Paul, thank you for doing the February 13 minutes. Is that something we should? Early, our last meeting, we thought we would take old business up first, just to get it out of the way. Are we prepared to take this? Has everybody had a chance to review his minutes?
I make a motion that we accept the minutes as written.
I second the motion.
All approve? We accept the minutes as written. Thank you, Paul, that was excellent.
Paul, you're on mute.
Thank you.
Our new business for this is really that this is a special meeting that we initiated to kind of, so we could tackle the issues that are brought forth from the planning board and the select board, which is Belgrade's current shoreline zoning ordinance, comparing it to best management practices and developing recommendations on whether and how to change them. I did send you out yesterday what the comprehensive plan review committee had found that,
Right.
that they recommended that the ordinance be reviewed. It just said all ordinances, not just shoreline zoning, but particularly shoreline zoning. And they put in some notation of what we found the recommendations. Get that out here. Yeah, we particularly, looked at what we're looking at now is, removing plants, removing soil erosion, heavy equipment moving, adding soil to the land, not putting back what was there originally, that kind of thing. Is there a gap? And it appears to be a gap in our shoreline zoning ordinance that doesn't tie into that. It kind of, so that's one place I think we should look at. And if we've got the, I think at the beginning, we should just feel, how do we want to proceed with this? Do we want to break it up with a few of us doing it or looking into it? Or tackle the whole shoreline zoning ordinance together? Or have assignments? It's kind of
I'm thinking of looking at more than just the buffer.
yeah, it's 75 pages.
Where are we at now? The select board they have to meet and give it to us, or has that happened?
I asked Lorna D. Nichols, the town manager, and she said she was all for it and said, that's a great idea, go ahead, so.
Hey, Pat, just to be clear, go ahead with what, but,
This, investigation of the shoreline zoning ordinance,
just looking at the whole thing.
you're looking at the whole thing, that was kind of but we haven't heard back from the select board whether they want to do it, but I don't think we really need them back.
Well, right, I think probably based on what transpired at the last select board meeting. I think to answer the question that Paul just asked, I think that probably the select board should vote
Yeah,
at their next meeting and likely will. I'd be very surprised if they didn't, just to hand it off to us.
exactly, so
Right,
we had this time already set aside for it, so we just,
yeah.
If
But
they don't hand it off, we're wasting our time.
right.
we're wasting our time, and I think that, I'd be very surprised if they didn't. But it is not, totally impossible.
No.
When is the next select board? Next Tuesday?
It is also possible they might, want to add one or two more people to the mix here. They might, which would be fine.
Yes.
Tanya, were you asking whether we get a copy of the shoreline zone?
Yes.
It's
Or is it
it's
online?
online, it's online and, under the Belgrade Town website. And I believe that we would be developing either changes or, it would be changes or, we change the whole thing. I don't know whether we amend it
Yeah.
or change it, but we would be developing that and recommending to the select board, I think. would
Exactly,
be
yeah.
That would go.
And that would be for, I think as Lenny has, told us, that would be for almost for 2025.
It would be.
Yeah, because it has to go to, the select board then would draw up an ordinance, or we might draw up the ordinance, but they would have to approve it. And then we'll go to the voters at town meeting in 2025.
Just to interrupt for a moment, I do believe that there's an opportunity to get ourselves heard in June when they vote on the school budget. I believe there's an opportunity to have a warrant on as part of that vote.
Perhaps, I don't know. But I think that's I don't think we could get it done that fast, but perhaps.
It's not gonna happen this year.
Well, Kimberly is suggesting possibly getting it done in time for the June vote, but do you think it's possible to do it that quickly?
There's a procedure that I saw someplace, and I'm trying to think where it was, that it was a very long procedure as to how to get an ordinance changed.
Well, we've been through it. We did it with the mooring ordinance, and it took a while.
Public hearings,
Right,
it's
right.
gonna, it's not something that
There's
just
a bunch of
shows up.
steps you gotta do,
Yeah.
And then, I believe DEP has to look at it as well.
Right, because we can't make anything less than DEP's doing, but we have the option of being more, you know, protective.
Stringent, yeah.
Pat, could you ask whoever's appropriate, Mary, I think, to print off copies for us?
I have a copy for you to look at today,
Never mind.
but the rest of us, we could, it's on your, you could get it on your
Yeah,
iPad and
we
just
can
pull it up. It's so many pages, it's gonna be,
It's a big document.
it's a big document.
I'm not anxious to print off something.
No.
I'd say it's 75 pages.
Yeah,
Okay.
here it is. Well, and not all of it's pertinent to what
Right,
we have to do, so I think
right.
I think the purpose of this meeting is just to, where do we go from here? How are we gonna organize it? What's the next step? So are we gonna do this in the course of our regular meetings that we have? On those, thank you, Howard.
Sorry to keep you waiting.
So we should just read through it and make notes, and then we can all compare our notes that we make.
Hans, we're talking about, reviewing the shoreline zoning ordinances and just seeing if there's where there may be, ways we could, strengthen them in certain cases if needed. At the comprehensive plan committee meeting we had, last year, in April, we talked about that at that committee. And you were, I think at that time, you recommended looking at revegetation, you know, meetings, you know, when people are making alterations to their waterfront in the shoreline zone was recommended as something that
I think it's in the minutes, it's a vegetative buffer.
Yes.
Vegetative buffer requirements or landscape plans were discussed as to the best way to achieve compliance of shrubbery and trees planted in a way to thrive and create buffers. So that's in the notes
Yeah.
from the April 26th meeting.
But that, we didn't, the comprehensive plan committee didn't go through this in detail. Sometimes this is just people making comments and it's part of the discussion, but it kind of where we're at now is how should we proceed ahead? Should we look at it all, or are there certain sections of that that are more pertinent for us to do, that are dealing with water quality, erosion control?
I think we should look at the ordinance.
Yeah.
And pull out the most significant features that we think need to be changed and do that as a start.
Yeah.
But I don't know that, we're gonna wanna change the entire
No,
ordinance, but it strikes me that certain things like buffer along the shoreline are very important. Setbacks are important.
Well, why don't we ask a man who's been enforcing it, what he thinks
yeah,
needs to be changed? Where are the weak parts of our current ordinance?
Code enforcement.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy right there.
that's why we wanted Hans here for the first one, so we could get his guidance and,
Yeah.
Well, and we've addressed buffers. Number one, there's policing, you know, when somebody does a project and they plant a buffer, usually we have 100% compliance when the project's complete. 2 or 3 years down the road, all sorts of things change, you know. A new owner might come in and decide, oh, I want to get rid of this buffer, not knowing the rules, you know.
Sure.
The other thing is it gonna be retroactive? We're gonna go around to everybody that has grass within 10 feet, whatever your buffer distance is gonna be, and we're gonna force them to plant. There's,
Can we, let me ask a question. Can we, do we have the legal authority to do that?
I don't believe so.
No, okay, well,
Because
then,
it's private property.
yeah, I'm saying, I don't know.
It kind of depends when it was put in, I would think.
Well, there's a point where it's overreach,
yeah.
you know, of
Yeah.
what are we gonna tell you can do with your property?
Well, beyond that, we can have enough to handle with stuff that's, you know, current. Rather than go back and add all that. I mean, you probably wanna go home once in a while.
Next,
Well, there's still the question of, you know, the lakes being impaired and deteriorating significantly, and where is that coming from? And, the survey of Great Pond that they did, that was Seven Lakes and might have done it, I guess. You guys familiar with that? A couple of years ago, they went and they found all what they call non-point source pollution.
Yeah.
And they came up with 250 of them or something, places, and they're on a map, someplace. I mean, it's not, I understand that it's a big, it would be a big thing to do to try to enforce, a buffer on all of Belgrade, but on the other hand, as we've seen with East Pond and North Pond, you know, we're in a very fragile situation. And those have bloomed and it's been horrible for the people that have property on those lakes. So what can we do?
What do you suggest we do with those 200 some odd cases?
Well, I mean, I think we need to get Seven Lakes Alliance, they've got a robust staff. They have people that have this sort of thing, ordinance in their footprint. They're scientists in many cases, most cases. And, I would get their input on the ordinance and ask them for ideas as to what we could change. But I mean, I know it sounds intrusive to tell people that they need a buffer, but on the other hand, around the country, that's not far reach for a lot of towns and cities. And I think that we can't just sit here and hope everybody does the best for the lake. I think what we're trying to do is come up with an ordinance.
In the shoreline zone ordinance, there is an unofficial buffer already kind of depicted. The first 25 feet from the high water mark is kind of a no-touch zone. You don't build structure on it. If something is there and it gets destroyed, it needs to be removed. There's no rebuilding it. But again, that was as the date of this ordinance being written. Since then, people, you know, beavers take down trees. Sunlight is introduced, and once sunlight's introduced, grass and other vegetation proliferates. So there's a natural transition, and then there's, well, nature's doing this, I'm gonna help it along too. So you pull out the sticks and heavy rain comes and washes some leaves away, or, you know, whatever happens, but there is always gonna be a transition. But the 25 feet from the high water mark is kind of sacred already. And that's in conforming lots, non-conforming lots, wherever we are. That is not supposed to be cleared and turned into hard surface.
Can we change it to 50?
That would be the overreach. There's already rules set for 50.
Yeah.
You know, I believe if we try to do something, you know, whatever changes are made have to get approved by the state. I'm sure that would probably get kicked back, and if it didn't, somehow it got through, I think we'd have lawsuits.
So there's I mean, I'm not sure we have to go to 50. There's just a lot of, if you ride around the lake in your boat and take a look, there's a lot of people that have grass running down to the edge, or they've got gravel, or, I mean, there's some things that, so once again, I think we would need guidance. What are we missing?
Well, in some places, grass to the water's edge is unavoidable. I mean, Abena Shores, at Shahagan Road, by the boat ramp, there's a flat lot there. It's been grass for a long, long time. And when the microburst came through, what trees that were on the shoreline got pushed back. And this is before I was here, but somebody told them they could go ahead and remove the roots and everything. So they took the trees down, removed the root balls, and now there's just steady erosion along the shoreline.
Yeah.
In that situation, all right, technically, we're not supposed to allow them to do anything, no retaining wall. My thought is, well, if we allow them to come 10 feet off the water, put in a retaining wall, the erosion will stop at that retaining wall. The lake won't be disturbed with the installation of the retaining wall. But over the next decade or two, when that erosion creeps in, it will eventually have to stop. So that's a landowner decision for them to go to DEP, get the permits, you know, we can't make exceptions to these rules, but the state can. And that's an Army Corps of Engineers thing. When they step in, they overrule the state. So this is, you can tell I've been learning too much.
And from what I was reading, an article about Sebago Lake, that these people had big trees and they were afraid they were gonna fall in their camp. So they had a plan that they had to plant five trees for every tree and leave the root balls in.
Mhm.
So that the root balls, leaving the root balls in is essential.
That's a big deal.
And typically, that's the rule of thumb, is the roots and stump, you can grind the stump down the surface, but it stays. With the exception of, you know, like the storms we just had, where they're over. When you cut the trunk of the tree off, well, it's not gonna flop back down, because
Often does.
it often does, but in some situations, when it came over, the roots uprooted some rocks, it won't allow it to go back.
Sure.
In those situations, the root ball can, what's above the ground can be cut off, removed, and then replanted around it. So,
Why don't we just require that they get a Lake Smart certification, they follow the regulations?
Yeah, that's a good
Why
one.
is that funny?
well,
You can't require someone to get one of those certifications. It's actually very hard to get a Lake Smart
What
certification.
you can require, you might want to modify, but you can require if you put it in the ordinance.
That they work at it, towards it.
Towards it, yeah, it's.
well, you can't make people re-roof their house or paint their house either. I mean, you see
Yeah.
dilapidated
Yeah, but that
structures.
doesn't bother the lake as much as.
No, I mean, Lake Smart is, you can't, and Lake Smart is not, I mean, it's not a government program, it's, it's voluntary.
Would be if it becomes part of the ordinance.
Like the Lake Smart ideas are best practice, they're not required.
Well, I mean, what we're trying to do is work towards best practice. It's not clear how far we can go, both legally and in terms of selling it to the, you know, to the population. I mean, obviously, this has got to be, any ordinance has to be approved by the public, so.
And best practice isn't, you know, one rule fits
Right,
everybody.
right,
You know,
okay.
we've got sloped, resource protected areas where,
Sure.
you know, some just absolutely can't be tolerated, and, you know, like this, being the shore where you've got grass to the wall. You know, if you tried to introduce duck there, force them to go to duck, well, it's gonna float off and into the water, you know, so.
But planting, I have like the, blueberry mat, the, bushes, the stuff that Seven Lakes and BLA has advocated. I mean, there are things, you can create a buffer, even if there's a lawn there now, you can create a buffer, can't you?
Yeah, sure.
That, can we mandate it, when we force them to.
Well, that's what I think we need to do, to investigate is, once again, go to Seven Lakes, try to get them to take a look at our ordinance. I mean, I know there are people on that staff that are capable of doing that, and, give us some guidance as to what we can do, and then, I mean, I know that it would be a change, but, I mean, the pictures of the blueberry and the algae and, you know, in North and East Pond, I mean, that's been horrible. People couldn't go in the water for months, you know, and that's gonna lower the property values, gonna lower the tax base.
People have sold because of it.
What's that?
People have sold their
People have
places.
sold, yeah, and,
Can't sell, which is the thing.
Yeah,
right, I mean, you're selling it
I
at
mean, I
cheaper
think
price.
it's gonna be in vogue at some point that people are going to say, if, say they're selling their property, they'll say, you know, we've been complying with Lake Smart, and it's gonna, you know, it'll be in vogue that people actually are trying to have a buffer zone that works for the lake.
So, yeah, so the question is, and I mean, my whole career, it's been people telling me I can't do something. I'm used to that, and, I mean, I'm used to that, and I just feel like, let's figure out why we can't. If we can't enforce a buffer retroactively, I mean, if that's, once again, if that's what Seven Lakes says, that's what Great Pond, Long Pond, you know, the other ponds in, the Belgrade town, if that's what they need, let's start working towards that. And, you know, Lake Smart has been a voluntary thing, and we've got the certification, and they come in and they look at everything, and they say, you know, you could do this and you can do that, and then they have to make a judgment call. They're gonna give you a Lake Smart, you know, certification, even though 130 feet away from the water, the rain drips off my metal roof on the front, and there's some exposed gravel there, you know, they mention it, but it wasn't enough to stop them from giving us the, certification, so. But I think it's a good idea to be moving in that direction, something like that.
We may have to modify the restrictions that they use right now in order to make it palatable.
Right.
But the idea is, get some sort of certification that we, meaning the town, would give. And then you have to comply with it, you have to maintain it. You should, what I envision frankly is they get, perhaps Seven Lakes comes around and certifies them. They take that certification and they submit it to Hans, you know, showing that they've complied. And then they maintain it from periodically, Hans would go back and check. You know, every 5 years or something like that, I don't know what it would be.
And that may be, it may also be septic, might be involved, septic system.
Whatever you want to add to it.
There could be other things involved, and it might require a larger budget for the code enforcement department, because, you know, if we're saying, I don't know, I mean, but you can't do more with the same amount if you're at the limit, so, but I think it's a priority of, we've just seen what's happened in other towns, and, I mean, it's lousy. I've got friends in Minnesota, and some of those are almost urban lakes, and they're just horrible. The water quality is horrible.
You know, that's part of the problem, from what I've seen. Not only here, but other jobs, that you get people from out of state. And they look at our lakes, they're used to looking at their lakes and seeing the green, and they walk across them, and it's crap. And they look at our lakes, they say, what's the problem? You know, look how clear it is, it's beautiful. What's the matter with people? They don't understand that there is a problem.
As a realtor, 30 years, I've had the opportunity to, you know, speak with those people. You know, there's new people coming in, they look at this beautiful, you know, lake, and they've got a camp 100 or maybe 80 feet back, they're just purchasing, and it's pretty heavily wooded. And they go, oh, what can I cut? I want, you know, they want to see the water, they want to,
I want to see the lake.
they want to see the lake.
They want to look like,
So usually that's,
Suburban Boston.
that's often a time when things change. You know, I was looking at, you know, that last year, just, you know, going up, down some shorelines. And I go, this used to be different, now it's much different,
yeah,
not in a good way.
Right.
It's more, the vegetation has been removed, more opening.
I don't know,
As time goes on, it's not going, rarely does it go noticeably in a big block of, you know, 2,000-3,000 feet of shorefront when you went down. You know, it's going the other way.
Yeah, one thing we need to do is keep some of this in perspective in
Yeah.
terms of how large a contribution this is making as a percentage of the total load.
Yeah.
Camp roads are probably bigger problem
bigger.
Yeah.
than all of this combined. And so that's, I mean, to the extent to which we have a purview there, I don't know if that's part of our charge or not. But that's something that we need to be thinking about. Camp roads and driveways, which of course are related, are major.
If they're in the
contributors.
shoreline zone, though.
If they're in the shoreline zone, and of course, well, yeah. it only, well, of course, it matters what happens up in the camp road comes into the shoreland zone in order to get to the shore.
Some of these are 100, a mile, mile,
Yeah.
mile. and a
Yeah.
half, mile.
It's,
And depending upon the lake, town and state roads also can be big contributors. Depending on where. Sure.
well, exactly, there's North Belgrade,
Yeah,
Jet Road, Jet Drive, whatever it's called.
well, McGraw Pond Road is a real problem in some
Where-
places.
You know, the water runoff from the road, it gets off the road, but now it's quarter of a mile from the lake, and there's nothing but a sloping wooded area that it rocks, and
Trickles through.
it becomes a river,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
lakefront owners. One person's calling me because the water's washing out their neighbor's yard, and they're blaming the neighbor for it.
Yeah, oh, yeah, you're thinking of that one off Renee.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been a huge problem for the last 4 or 5
And-
years.
You know, they manage it the best they can, but you can't stop just a massive flow of water.
Yeah. Yeah, it's coming down the hillside there and then along the road. Yeah.
And what has been evidenced there is the grass does keep the soils intact. Where there's not grass, it washes out.
Yeah.
Even across from the Salmon Lake Dam, there's that big yard that has a gully through it. And it's running water right now. It runs, I would say, 7 months, 8 months out of the year. It's got grass on it. The grass.
Is that the one that has all the geese on it all the time? Is that the big yard? It's not far from the dam, across the road.
Across from, the old store.
Yeah,
Anderson store.
across from the old store, yeah, right across from there, yeah.
And if you go in there and you stop and look where the grassy area comes, there's a culvert, and on the other side of the culvert, there's nothing. And you can see how much is washed out, because there's no mat of vegetation there,
Yeah.
so. Grass isn't always the evil. It's evil when you cut it, and the clippings go in and.
But we got clipping and, yeah, okay. Yeah, right, I mean, grass, right, grass is not great. Among other things, there's a lot, there's a fair amount of phosphorus loading to the lakes from the atmosphere, which is coming out of, much of it's coming out of the Midwest. From utilities that are,
That's still a problem?
oh, yeah, that's very definitely a problem. And it's landing into the lakes, but it's also landing onto lawns, and then it gets washed off the lawns into the lake, so.
So if there's gravel going down, by a road, gravel, so the, runoff. And my understanding is that gravel is the phosphorus is coming from that gravel very often. not
Sometimes,
from-
yeah, they're definitely.
Not necessarily, it's dissolved, it's not.
Yeah.
Erosion of silt and stuff like that,
Mhm.
so. If it goes on to grass, is the grass absorbing that phosphorus?
Well, the grass, as Hans said, the grass can slow it down and, I mean, if you see water coming across a lawn, some of it may just continue across it. It's a huge flow, but a lot of it will just settle down and just, be absorbed into the ground right there, unless it's highly compacted soil.
If it was a vegetative buffer though,
And then it's even better.
it would be typically trapped and absorbed by the plants and the.
Right, yeah, but grass can also trap and absorb some. It's just not as good.
Well,
It's
it's
still-
still the ground is saturated, then
Yeah,
it flows over the top, just like
yeah,
Jet Drive. It's
Yeah.
running through the forest.
yeah.
And, if your vegetation, your plants absorbed all the water, well, nothing will get to the lake, but.
Yeah, but that'll happen with the buffer as well. Eventually, it'll.
It leaches through the vegetative buffer or the woods, but at least it's used up by those plants as well.
Yeah.
Phosphorus is a nutrient.
Yeah, well, it's used up if it goes down, but if everything's so saturated, it can just flow right over.
Right.
So, and that does happen, but not very often, unusual.
So would it be our charge? Actually, it might be our charge to be looking at the runoffs of that situation. I don't, never seen it, so I don't know what I'm talking about, but if you got a gully, and if you had settling ponds for a gully, you know, that would be required by the town of Belgrade, then that might mitigate some of the phosphorus runoff into the lake, wouldn't it?
Some, yeah, it would.
Yeah. Is
mitigate
there a
some, but like in this
ordinance for that,
situation,
or-
there is a small retention pond that the landowners did try to create years back. But, you know, it gets inundated, it fills up and it overflows.
Yeah.
But it does create a place for the heavier silts to drop. Again, there's maintenance involved with that, so.
Right.
You gotta clean it out every periodically, or it just fills up and you're back to where you started.
The Belgrade Lakes Association has worked on management studies on the Great Pond watershed and the Long Pond watershed, and each one of these is involved in getting like citizens, you know, to walk every property.
Right.
And then notate any, erosion control problems, whether it's be, lack of vegetation, running water across driveways, and make notes of that. Those are all that information that gets taken back, and then letters went out to the owners and just gave them a heads up. Hey, we saw this and that. And then it develops into an action plan, which they're working on now on both lakes. So a lot of that investigation has been done over the last 3 or 4 years. It might be good to, bring in the, PLA, Portland and get, or, to talk about that and see where these two, where are they at with the Long Pond and Great Pond studies? What's been done, surveys were done, and
Well, there were surveys also done on Salmon McGraw
Yeah.
and on Mesolonsky, so if
so
you're gonna
they've
do
all
those, you should
they've
do
all
all.
been done.
Yeah.
And these were, walking, I was there, and both of them, you're walking, you had a certain sector to walk, you went down, made yourself known to landowners, took photographs of issues, and just had a report on each piece of
Right.
property that you were assigned. So that all came back.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Jen Jesperson ran
Yes.
all these surveys. So she would be a very good person for us to have
Yes,
in.
and she,
She would be able to identify the areas that might
Yeah,
need.
she did not run the surveys per se. She was involved in taking the survey information and working that up into what are called the protection plans, the watershed protection plans for each of the lakes.
I thought she ran the survey. I mean, went to,
She didn't run the surveys. That's not really her bailiwick.
I know, but in this thing, she assigned different areas that. different
Well, I
people
should
walk-
say, I was not involved in the surveys for Great Pond and Long Pond. She might have been involved with that.
I was involved in those. But I
Yeah,
think
so
what we should concentrate on is the process. I mean, we can talk all day about this, what might happen or what might not happen, but how are we going to proceed in a sort of structural way?
Well, no, I think that Pat's suggestion of bringing in Jen and possibly bringing in people from each of those who were involved in those surveys and in the protection plans for each of those lakes would not be a bad idea, and talk about what's needed, what they see as needed based on the information that came out of the surveys and the protection plans.
Yeah, I was making a list, that we could ask people to review the shoreline zone and come meet with us and give us the recommendations, like people like Jen Jesperson, George Steele, Andy Marvel, maybe KV Cog.
Well, Andy Marvel is no longer, he's not working as a code enforcement officer, is he?
No, he's not, but he knows the shoreline zoning backwards and
He
forwards.
does. Well, another person who would be very good, who's just recently retired from Seven Lakes, is Charlie Bader.
Yeah.
He's been working with the grants, the section 319 grants that have come out of those protection plans from the lakes. The grants, the government grants to actually remediate some of the problems that were found. So he has a really good idea of what the actual problems are and how to fix them.
I agree with you, Lenny. I think we have to get an idea, perspective on how to prioritize these problems. And these
Right.
people who have the experience, have been out there for a long time, could give us a lot of information.
I
Maybe-
agree. I think Charlie would be very valuable. I actually spent a day with him working on the Great Pond survey. So I think he's a great person to reach out to.
And to Paul's point, the process is kind of a good place to start.
Yeah.
And late, it's been past year or two, it's been a lot of discussion about the DEP process, how when a permit by rule is granted by them, people assume that it's a permit to do the work, and it's not. They need to get local permissions and check to see if other permits are required. The end of section 14 of the shoreline zone ordinance, it's the land use chart. And at the very end, there's a note that says a person performing any of the following activities, yada, yada, must get the permit from DEP, which is the permit by rule. So I thought, since there's that gap between them getting a permit by rule and foregoing the municipal process,
Is it a permit?
that,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
that we, change that note to actual, the title permit by rule, and make it part of the ordinance that requires them to, have their plan reviewed by the code enforcement officer, and then not proceed unless they have a permit from the planning board or the code enforcement, whichever.
What
exactly is the permit by
rule?
Is it a permit by
It's
rule?
basically the DEP acknowledging that you're gonna do this and that they say it's allowed.
Isn't it limited to simple projects? You can't get a permit by rule to build a whole camp and clear your property.
Well, permit by rule usually is anything within the shoreline zone, primarily within the 75-foot area. So rather, we take this note from the ordinance and turn it into basically an instruction that they get the permit by rule, and that the permit by rule is reviewed and authorized to the town.
So it's 2 steps rather than 1.
Exactly.
And the town is the site.
It gives us more it mandates our oversight. And that's just some place to start. I
Yeah.
mean, it's,
We're really looking at gaps in, Hans, as you say, in the procedure.
yeah,
And so that's something to focus on, not even the written ordinance, but how it works practically, and so where the gaps are in enforcement.
and it's gonna force the landowner to learn.
Right.
The process is gonna force them to learn something. Unless, of course, they just hire their engineering and say, we'll write a check instead.
Yeah. Well,
You need to,
You find that to be true?
Some places.
oh, sure, some people do that.
specify when you go to the planning board, when you go to the code enforcement officer. The way this reads, you can take your choice.
No, it would be
It says or.
whichever body governs the project. So I would review the project, and if it's gonna be a planning board decision, according to the land use chart, they would go to the planning board. If it's something that I approve, then I could approve it. And some of these things don't require approval, but it would get reviewed.
What it says is work may not commence until the building permit is issued by the town of Belgrade Planning Board or the code enforcement officer.
Okay,
It doesn't say which one I have to go to.
well, you can put verbiage in there that suits you.
Yeah, that's what I'm
The
saying.
planning board or the code enforcement
And-
officer knows which one needs to issue the permit.
This is a jumping
If
off.
I have a landowner, I go ahead and I got a, some problem we had before Hans. They go to the code enforcement officer who just give them anything they
Gives them
want.
anything they want,
Yeah.
sure.
And they say, well, I got my permit, it said, oh, the code enforcement, and I did that.
So maybe we need to reference the,
Need to say when you go to
the
which,
chart,
each,
yeah.
each, yeah, that's all.
which is in there,
Well,
it's in the.
this is gonna be.
Right, but this is, it's already in here as to what, so we could reference back to the, what did you call this? The
That's section 14, the land use table.
Land-
land use table, so we could reference them back to the. land
It's
use
fine, as
table.
long as it's clear, that's.
Yeah, no. Let's get it.
Yeah, this is my suggestion, you can alter it any way you want. Eventually, you know, it has to go to vote, you're turning in, there's a process.
Yeah.
This is step number one.
Well, that's one of the things we're gonna be looking for is inconsistencies in the ordinance too.
Just on back on, you know, the work that the lake associations did. That kind of shows you what has happened now, but it didn't deal with any recommendations on to correct these type of, you know, issues. The town should do this or do that. Maybe we should, you know, as we outreach with them, what other recommendations could they give us to, you know, whether it's, you know, ditching that's going down, it isn't, you know, properly mulched or hardened, that's taking dirt in the lake, or other types of activities. Many of them were just properties over time, took more trees out, opened up more ground, more grass got in, more open areas that were just dirt, just kind of incrementally, not so much,
Right.
it just, it got worse over time rather than better, you know. In these, just having worked on both those plans and walking around, did the surveys, you could kind of see it was more like things that would just happen, you know, if you don't take care of your land, or you don't keep it buffered, it just gets worse. You know, over 20 years, things can change quite a bit.
Right, yeah.
And it was a lot of that kind of just gradual getting worse as far as maintaining a good buffer. In some cases, it gets much better. But few.
Do you see DLA or Seven Lakes doing anything more for us than advising us on changes that need to be made?
I see them, they are deeply into this,
What does that
more than
mean?
we are. You know, they've got, you know, these two, you know, the studies on the lakes going. Seven Lakes has got an erosion control person, the lakes people, scientists. They've got the knowledge and horsepower to.
They don't have any enforcement
No
capability.
enforcement, so
That's
we
what
are,
I'm getting at, that's. what I'm
we're the
getting at.
pointy end of the stick right here.
Right.
But we need the guidance and the work from them, because we don't have the ability to go out and survey the whole watershed.
I'm not arguing that, it's just that we shouldn't be feeling that they're gonna do all this for us.
No, but the
Town is gonna have to take a,
town is gonna have to take the lead and ask it for it. And seeing what we can get, what's reasonable, and,
I'd be willing to talk to Seven Lakes Alliance.
I think that'd be,
And see what they can do to advise us on this.
right, and maybe, you know, look at sections of the
I
ordinance,
think they should look at
look at the whole.
I've contributed money to that. I'd like to see them, you know, rather than just measure, what's going on out there, I'd like them to be, you know, lead us to be more proactive.
Yes.
And I think it's not them, they're not gonna enforce anything, but
No,
if they can give us the guidance where we can, you know, look at the ordinances, and if needed, there's ways that we can strengthen the ordinance where, you know, we can actually make an impact. That would be tremendous,
both
so,
Lenny and I are on the board,
right,
and you, great experience with that, so that'd be great.
I know some people there.
You know a lot of, you, everybody.
I know some people there.
I think we're at that point now, we know we need to do something, but how to do it,
Yeah,
yes, we don't have the expertise in this committee to do all this work. In order to jump to-
but we should, I think all of us should be looking at, go through the ordinance, read the ordinance, and try to, you know, see if we can spot some things that could be changed. I think that would make sense. In this, you know, Hans is has spotted a hole here, which is good. Yeah, permit by rule, I mean, if DEP doesn't do anything in 14 days or whatever it is,
It's automatic.
then it's automatic. So if, I don't know what would happen, if they can't get to everything, but if they looked at it and it just didn't look like a big deal, they wouldn't even look at it. I mean, they wouldn't even do a site visit, I guess, you know.
They can't, they're overwhelmed, they're understaffed, and it's basically become a rubber stamp, and they will tell you that.
Now, I moved a rock and they actually did come out and do a site. I mean, I had
Well,
photographs and stuff.
That
like
rock was submerged, that was a.
It was a
unique
big ass
situation.
rock, so. So they did come out and look at it, which is good, you know, we were all squared away and it was all right, and this, right in the way of everything, so.
Well, that was a safety issue.
There was a navigational hazard,
It was right in the lake.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it was an erratic, geological erratic that was 4 feet tall and 8-10 feet long, you know, and it was right in the way of, somebody hurting themselves. So.
So you were allowed to just,
Yeah, we just,
Put it away a little.
I just tucked it over
Drag it
to the
away.
side and it's now actually, nice off to the side and it's not, and it was just a sand bottom, so completely sand
How
bottom.
did you move it?
What's that?
How did you move it?
Dynamite.
Who's the guy that did your, boathouse? Scott Horn, right? Yeah,
Scott Horn. Yes.
Yeah, Scott, I said, okay, Scott, if you're up in my brother-in-law's driveway and you get an excavator with a cable down there, we put a cable around it with a sling.
Yeah, from the shore then.
From the shore and just pulled it in an angle and it's
Okay.
nice, right up against.
I was hoping you weren't gonna tell me he drove his dozer down.
I know. No, but
I've seen that happen.
he did have some guys down in there and it was snowing out and he's like out there with 1 foot on the rock and 1 foot in a canoe. It was just like, all right, this is with a cigarette in his mouth. So I like that, this is gonna go well.
This, for the record, the rule, if we just visit the rule on this
Right.
operation there, you had to leave the rock under the water.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so you can,
move.
removing it out of the water would have been
No.
not allowed, disallowed.
Right,
Even if it would break the surface of the water,
right,
it's not allowed.
So we
So
gotta go out there,
essentially,
yeah.
make sure I don't see
it's
that.
allowed, you can move rocks with permit under the water. You're not changing the complexion of the water,
Mm,
other than you disturb.
We're
the
gonna
muscles.
check, Chris.
no, is that, what's that?
I'm gonna check.
Please come over and check. DEP's been there, but it's, it's a nice little
You have
spot
the, you
there
have the
for
drink, you have the drinks ready.
great fish. And yeah, I mean, absolutely, Mike, I'll have, a potluck right out going for you. I know you.
Our charter calls to work with our conservation partners. Seven Lakes is one of them, so I think this is an ideal task, where they're welcome and.
Good.
Can we get them to be on this committee?
They have representatives, don't they have representatives? Yes, we, aren't you one of you? guys?
No, we're just Lake Association,
Association. It's another committee, I guess.
right? But, we look to them for this guidance.
Yeah, it's,
That's why they're here.
it seems like it better be why they're here.
Yeah, a number of board members already on the committee.
Right.
Need to have that.
Two
membership.
board members, but they're not, you guys
We
aren't
are.
intimately, familiar with what they're doing on a day-to-day.
No, and they have the expertise, the training, the experience,
Right,
and that's in, the.
And that's the relationship we should continue to have. not-
Yes. So I
They'll
think,
come. There's no reason to believe they won't be helpful.
no, I think they'll be very encouraged by it.
absolutely.
And missed a big thing and, their lake water quality is one, probably the major, charge they had. And this is a town reaching out for support that we need, so I think,
So how are we gonna do this, gentlemen and ladies? How are we gonna, we're not gonna do this with 12 meetings the next year. We're gonna have to meet more often. We're gonna have to roll up our sleeves on this.
I think maybe, first step, if Chris contacts them, shows them the scope of work, looking through our shoreline zoning, looking for holes in it that can improve, water quality, things we should be doing. I've read through it 2 or 3 times this, last week, and it's pretty good. I mean, I'm not, clever enough or know what to do enough to say we should do this.
And by all means, study the ordinance, and if you have questions, email
Yeah,
me with questions, is this possible? I mean, how, or we don't have to wait till
yeah,
a meeting. If you've got a question, you see something that you think might be a good trigger point, and
Well, Hans, can you give us a written memorandum on your gaps, voids, suggestions to the changes in the shoreline zoning?
well, I've got this one here, but I'm kind of waiting for some input. I want to hear the ideas from someone else's perspective, because this ordinance has been in my head for quite some time. And when I look at it, I'm looking at the same graffiti I've looked at for years. You know, I outside perspective is welcome and warranted.
I think we all should review the ordinance and jot down our ideas and suggestions and questions and review that maybe at our next meeting together.
Sure. Hans, do you also enforce the plumbing?
I do.
So you do septic systems as well? Yes.
I did read through the shorelands ordinances of a couple of towns that are kind of similar to us, Bridgeton, Naples,
Yeah.
and just to see,
Oh, okay.
and we have much more stringent, a lot more details.
Naples is a joke.
And I was stunned. I said, I read through ours, and it's, very, especially with,
No, that's a surprise.
erosion control things. There's
Naples
some
is
gaps, there are, but
Naples took planning board references completely out of their ordinance.
yeah. I printed an old one here. And then I looked at what they had online, like, oh, they wiped everything out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just, but you're exactly right. It had some very stringent ones that I thought we should have.
I've studied other towns around, and, we are kind of, I don't want to say we're the best, but we're different. And, again, because of recent activities around this lake, there's this argument of permit by rule to local permit. And I did find this note, I've looked at it 100 times, and it jumped out at me one time, and it said, I can change that note into a rule. So that's where we're gonna go with it.
When's the next regular meeting?
Second Tuesday of the month. In March. That March 12th or so.
I know that's the next day, like the 13th. Well, we gotta be in Boston.
Yeah, we have it the 12th, right?
Yes,
12th?
Well,
So that's right, we're in Tuesday,
March,
3:30?
yes.
right. And were we thinking about going to an every 2-week thing while we trying to get through this, so. So
That's
then
the
the
12th,
next
right?
one would be the 26th?
Yes.
That's a good idea.
No. Let's go to the next meeting and then talk about it.
Okay,
Well, that we'll discuss at the meeting at the 12th.
I don't wanna get meeting out. I have no problem if we see what we can accomplish in the scheduled meetings.
So we have one task for each one of us is to go through the shoreline zone ordinance, look through it, see what we can see.
That should be on the agenda for next time, to talk about that.
Do we want to do this before we involve Seven Lakes? Or,
Yeah,
well, I think I'll talk to them and just sort of
yeah,
feel them out for it and just tell them what we're wrestling with and see if, what resources they can, give us, because I know they've got quite a bit of depth. I mean,
Yeah.
this.
They must have a checklist of things they'd like.
no, I'm thinking of not having, do what we're gonna review the ordinance before we have them in here.
Well, I wouldn't bring them in, but I
know, but
would
your
just talk to them.
suggestion is fine with me.
Yeah, I just talk to them and just say, this is what we're dealing with. Can you guys take a look at it? Who would look at it? can they do it? And then we'll,
Well, I think
get some feedback.
doing that and getting feedback from Stewart is critical, because Stewart is kind of their frontline person who's out visiting properties, and homeowners are saying, well, this is what I want to do. And Stewart's, they want to use the YCC to transition, transfer this ice berm front water frontage into something that the kids can enjoy.
Right.
And, literally, they want to take excavators to the shoreline, flatten it out, and put it in riprap. And so Stewart will let you know how much of that is out there and
Right.
what DEP will allow. And if DEP is gonna allow it, and then we're saying they can't, well, Maine is a land use state. And if somebody owns that land and they wanna use it, who's the municipality telling them they can't?
When you say Maine is a land use state, what are you saying by that?
It's public land use, that's why somebody, if the land's not posted and it's unimproved and somebody wants to walk on it, they're welcome to walk on it.
Yeah, but not cut trees or
Do
doing.
not cut trees, they can walk,
Well,
fishing,
what does that have to do
fishing,
with,
fouling, and
yeah, what does that have to do with the homeowner modifying the waterfront? I don't quite understand.
well, if it's their land and they wanna use it
Mm-hmm,
as to their enjoyment, their recreation.
mm-hmm. But do you mean
That's not the same thing as
philosophically,
land
do you mean
use.
that philosophically Maine is inclined that way? Or do you mean that they have a legal right to do it in Maine, whereas they wouldn't necessarily have the legal right to do it in another state?
Well, other states,
Doesn't matter.
again, public land use, you're right. That's public land, somebody walking on the land and using the land. But when somebody owns the land,
Mm-hmm.
it's my land, I'm gonna do what I want with it.
Sure, but I mean, you can say that in Delaware, or you can say that in Nevada. I mean, what makes
To a-
Maine
to a
different?
point Where,
The courts have not upheld that. The courts have upheld the municipality's right to enforce these ordinances.
The ordinances.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, you can't go in and say, tell them to do something that's not against the law.
But if the state issues a permit to do something, I mean, it would come into that whole, well, who has the authority? If the state says I can do it, who are you to say I can't?
State is supreme.
Exactly, and that's what.
Well, but the ordinances are tighter than the state, minimum is really a minimum ordinance.
And I'd just be curious to, what you learn from Stuart,
Okay.
what his perspective is on it, because he's been here too. Quite a bit.
Well, I mean,
If people can do what they want, is that what the
but if,
direction they're going?
if we get the ordinance approved by DEP, is that, I mean, that would be the
That would-
equivalent of getting the state imprinter on, or not?
To give you a building permit, is that what you're saying?
No, or just for what, I mean, just if we have an ordinance in some area that is more restrictive than the states.
And that's kind of what they want us to do with the shoreline zone,
Right.
Yeah,
and there's that gray area in the middle that people want to fight about.
yeah,
And there are changes, I think the state's redoing their chapter 1000.
what does that mean?
The chapter 1000 is the guideline ordinance for the shoreline zone ordinance.
Oh, okay.
So that might be an easier read to start. And that's what I did, is I basically studied the chapter 1000 and then I studied our ordinance,
You said the state is in the process of redoing it.
updating it, yes.
Oh, okay.
And I think the authorities are gonna be, who has authority in which situation is gonna be addressed. Because the chapter 1000 encompasses shoreline, like
Land use.
all the land use for the fishermen, docks, wharves, piers along the whole coast. And they tried to take this ordinance and apply it to inland waters. And they're finding a lot of conflicts.
The colonial Great Ponds Act is still in effect. And that says you can walk across any uncultivated land for the purpose of fouling, fishing. You can't bring a motorboat in, but you can carry your canoe in. That's still in effect. They could walk right across your lawn. So that would be an argument, of course, your law, that might be cultivated.
Unimproved house. Unimproved, I mean,
I have a
unclosed.
lawn. Can they park in my driveway and,
That's
that's
trespass.
you know, that would be,
So
so,
they have to walk.
but to get back to,
What we gotta do, good.
to get back to, the ordinance of Belgrade ordinance. So if a Belgrade ordinance would be like is 100 feet, is that the state or is that the Belgrade 100-foot setback for a structure?
That is state.
That's state, okay.
I think it's on our
A-
ordinance too, isn't it? The ordinance also says 100.
I do, yeah, our ordinance can't say anything less than what the state.
So the minimum lot frontage feet of being 200, that's Belgrade, is the state 100?
That state is too.
State is 200. So I'm just trying to understand what you're saying that if the state comes in and gives a permit by rule for something, but it's in a violation of a Belgrade ordinance, you get homeowners, property owners, pushing back, saying that the state told me it was okay.
Mhm.
And and what do you do in a situation like that?
I'll give you an actual case that I'm running into, is there was an excavator. It was on the shoreline. It was pulling off dirt, stumps and rocks.
Yeah.
And I stopped. And I was very fortunate that the DEP gentleman was 5 miles away. Because I was able to get him on the phone and he came right over. And the idea was, this was permitted because of the ice expansion. Instead of pushing the soils up and causing fresh erosion each year, they wanted to take away this berm, create a riprap sloping ramp so that now the ice would rise up at an angle and recede. And the most they would have to do each year for maintenance would maybe take some riprap and put it back. So it was, I don't know if it was test or what was going on, but they stopped because you got big boulders. I mean, this just isn't logical. You're moving way more earth than.
You need to.
And
It's-
yeah.
on an idea that you're gonna, and of course, the guy wanted a nice place to have his dock and his kids swimming.
Right.
This berm was inconvenient. So I'm not sure if that expired after 14 days or how that permit got through, but we did stop the project.
What was the final result? Did they have to?
They threw riprap up underneath the berm and the voids.
Left the berm there.
They're able to go 2 feet high, so they put what they wanted. Landowner, still hasn't got anything nice to say about me, probably
No.
never will.
Too bad.
So, in that situation though, basically permit by rule, maybe it wasn't paid attention to enough and they had a permit to get an excavator in there, at least that's what they thought.
Mhm.
And they, so you were able to stop it, but they didn't sue the town or anything like that.
No.
So, I'm just trying to get a perspective on, what it, so we can be more stringent than the state.
And again, that's where this process here, I think, will help.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't be less than the state.
Right, don't wanna, and we don't.
And I have to leave. I'm sorry. I have a heart appointment.
Uh-oh.
Okay, Paul, we're gonna wrap up in a couple of minutes, so.
I'll do the minutes. Thank you.
You're going to sue Paul.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You didn't answer me.
Where'd you go?
Well, I think we've got a lot on our
Yeah.
plate now. Yes, it's a. So what we have now is, we're all gonna read through our shoreline zoning, make comments as to where we think things could be checked or revised or have questions, is this the best, is there a better way to do this or that? I've got a couple already. Based on looking at Bridgeton's old ordinance, which was very strict on what Hans was talking about, bringing an excavator over, dragging, dirt off, dragging the natural dump off of the trees, and then trying to replace that with grass, stuff like that. They had a draft, it had to be done with. Any work that was required to be done, you had to put it back how it was, which would be small sack ones, large ones, a mix almost like a lake slide. And they subsequently have taken it off their most recent one I saw. I'll share that with everybody so they can see that, but if we can all come back at our next meeting with our thoughts, I think as you get them, just share them with everybody, so maybe we can see them before we get here. And have it, send them to Hans too, and let him weigh in, if we get your,
I'll field any questions.
you feel any questions, and,
The
Chris,
ideas,
you
thoughts.
can talk to Seven Lakes.
Yeah, I'll talk to Lynn and Pete about it and see, what their recommendation is for staff as far as the appropriate people to talk to on this and go from there.
Think we're good,
Great.
motion to adjourn. All in favor? Thank you.
Great night, everybody.
You got that ordinance?
Just get it out of my.
Pat, you had that
I'll
ordinance?
tell you. what-
Which one,
It's shoreline zoning.
on Bridgeton?
I don't care about fiction. Builder.
Oh, he wants a copy of the,
Belgrade.
he wants your printer to give him the copy of the. Belgrade.
Have you done it already? Oh, you have?
As promised. As promised.
Thank you.
That's a really the way to do this, to read it on piece of paper.
It is, when you look at it, in Zoom or online, it's a lot easier, I like to make notes.
Well, my screen's all covered with all these yellow highlight marks.
Yeah.
So can I get one from the town?
They may be able to print them for you.
I'll do that.
General.
Thank you, Pat.
That was a good meeting, and we got some headway in on what to do.